please keep it to 2 minutes or less and identify yourself when you speak. Yeah, sure, wherever you like.
How's it going? My name is Joe Ramirez. I'm actually with City Electric Supply, electrical distributor. My shop is out of Pasadena. The reason I am here today is because the whole Edison deal that's going on, and I don't know if you guys are aware of the PSPS program, Public Safety Power Shutoff deal that they're going to be doing. I'm mainly here to just help you guys get through those situations with generators, home standby generators. Mid-East, back west, down south, everywhere else. Everyone knows about those, except here in California. It's turning into a huge problem now. Well, it's going to be turning into a huge problem coming this summer with people losing the power. And a lot of people are on septic and different stuff out here. And we all take this water meters, we all still need a shower. We don't know the guidelines on how long the shutoff's gonna be going for, but there is a website out there called prepareforpowerdown.com. I suggest everyone read it, check it out, get to know it, and I'll be here all evening. So anyone want to talk to me afterwards, I'm here.
Are
Yes.
your generators, they're all ARB compliant and?
Yes.
Okay.
They're full propane and natural gas hookups, all within code here in California.
And Edison's plans have said that the shutdown could be as long as 72 hours if they have to.
Yes.
So you'll be able to support.
These generators, we done a generator back during the Thomas fire. A gentleman ran his generator for over a month. And all you had to do was change the oil on it. It's just like a car. You take care of it like a car, they'll last you years.
Okay, well, we have Edison here, so
Okay.
if there are like any, careful, you watch out, you might burn your house down.
Yeah.
I assume Edison will tell us.
Yes.
Can you stay while they're?
Yeah, I'll be here all evening.
Okay.
So, and then actually, in back of my truck right now, I have a 22 kilowatt generator, the most common generator for your homes. And then I
And
can
that
talk to you guys.
should power a fridge and.
Oh, yeah.
Up to 1 or 2 air conditioners too. They're so smart nowadays, it runs off of Wi-Fi, so you can control a lot of it. It's actually to the point where I've taken it so serious with what's going to be happening here in Southern California with Generac directly I teamed up with. They just flew someone out from Wisconsin today that I'm doing a training course tomorrow at my office in Pasadena for 15 contractors to learn on how to install these properly and get certified. So we're taking a full leap on this.
And do you have to get a permit from Edison or anyone else to?
You usually got to pull a permit, because especially a lot of the older homes, we usually got to do a panel upgrade and all that too. So it's best to do it all at once.
So that permit would be with the county for here?
Yes.
Unincorporated, okay.
Yes.
And Edison a permit too, or approval?
They will still have to come and unlock your meter, and you have to run it through them too.
Okay. You have a card?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have it with.
Okay. I'm taking notes tonight.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we're talking about, the Edison decides that due to fire conditions, they're gonna shut down the power.
Mhm.
That's what we would, the generator,
Once the grid gets cut, these generators will automatically kick on. Once the grid kicks back on, they automatically shut off themselves. And they're hooked up to your phone now. So you would, if you're away from home, you would get alerts right away on what's going on with your generator.
And where do these generators come from?
They're coming from Wisconsin. They're made in Wisconsin.
Okay. Do you guys provide them or do we?
I stock them. I
Or do
have.
we have to pay for them is my question.
Oh, yes.
Well, if they're.
No, they're
I mean,
free.
if you say 3 days, we can't use our water when we have no.
This is why I'm getting out now, to get the word out there, to start planning for them.
Oh.
I understand some people are not gonna jump on it right away. It may take the first time, second time, but it all depends. The whole Acton, Aqua Dulce area is in the tier 3 area, so it is in the extreme zone.
So how much are the generators?
The ballpark,
Okay.
it's a rough number, like it's your standard 22 kilowatt, which is the most, we want to power everything. You're looking at for a full installation, everything around 10 grand.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
But
no more than that.
But it all depends on your demand. What do you really want to control?
Yeah.
So that's where we work with the contractor. We get the contractor in there, figure out your amperage load. Average home nowadays is not pulling 200 amps. So there's ways to cut around it.
So, if you have solar, and, you're thinking about putting in a battery system and maybe doing it maybe this year because of the 30%
Yes.
federal, okay, so with Edison, if you have have solar, your solar turns off too. You can't
Yes.
even get power out of your solar even when
Exactly.
they're in shutdown, unless you have a battery system.
And those batteries are usually only gonna last about 12 hours on average.
Right, so how does your system work with the battery system and Edison? Because we won't be shut off from Edison if we have the power, battery backup.
It would automatically kick on over.
So you coordinate with all three of
Yes.
those elements, four,
We are-
solar, but
We are
battery,
building homes
Edison.
right now where we are doing solar with battery storage and generators with buried propane tanks.
Okay.
So depending on that, where the property is, or if you got a propane, or if you're on natural gas, because we do got people that are worried about the doomsday type stuff, or a big earthquake, if we lose natural gas, then at least we can hook it up to propane, and you're still good.
Or here we have a lot of people who are just on
Yeah.
propane.
Yeah, which is even better.
Yeah.
So,
How long would you guys turn off the power for, half a day?
well, then that's up to Edison on their guidelines. They got certain guidelines that they're gonna be going by.
Okay.
You have a business card?
Yes.
And for the people in the community who are with Clean Power Alliance, who moved their purchase
Yes.
from Edison, does that complicate things, or you can take care of that?
No, this is
Okay.
mainly going from your main power into your meter, then we're going down to what we call automatic transfer switch.
So it's transparent from the person from whom you buy power?
Yeah,
Okay,
it'll work with it.
I figured, but I just
Yeah,
wanna make
no,
sure.
look good. All right,
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you very much.
All right, any other community comments? All right. Moving along. All right, minutes of last meeting, we're gonna skip because Tony's not here. Treasurer's report.
Exactly what we had last month. No changes, sorry.
All
A
right.
couple of $100 basically, right?
A little more than that, Jackie, I
Okay,
didn't
good.
bring that with me tonight.
All right. Oh, I forgot to update Deputy Sophist.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I go with that. All right, and I don't see Deputy Martinez here, so Jim, it's you.
Good evening.
Good.
A little bit to talk about with the library and the library world. First thing I want to mention is the big journal in the library world is called Library Journal. They did name, I want to let everyone know, they named LA County Library Library of the Year. So the whole system, they liked us the best.
That's because
Got
of
the
you.
most
It's because of you.
Got it.
Well, I didn't want to come out and say it was because of me, because there are a lot of other people around, but
We'll toot your horn for you.
works for me. So that's a cool thing. Working out details, but there's gonna be different celebrations at various libraries throughout the county on the 26th of this month. Lily and I have no idea what we're doing yet. We're still planning. But there'll be something. So that's really kind of a cool thing. Next thing I do want to bring up is we are now in June. Our summer reading and discovery program is officially kicked off. So what that means is I've got activities and programs for everybody. So for all different ages, you can sign up for the reading program. You can earn prizes and little incentives for reading and doing challenges and whatnot throughout the summer. We've got a whole box of trinkets for the kids and everything, and I'll have things for adults too. There's an adult summer reading program. And with the adult one, we'll actually be giving out certain drawings for like tumblers, and at the very end, I believe they're doing Kindles again this year, Kindle Fires. So if you're interested in signing up, come on into the library. The adult summer reading program, it's all online. So you just go to our website and follow the links, and you can start going and writing your reviews and all that good stuff. Aside from that, some programs that are going on. We are doing a Father's Day activity, so we can bring the kids in. They're gonna make a special little gift for dads. I don't wanna give it away, but it'll be fun.
It's really cool, right?
Yeah, dads will like it. We've got another program coming up on June 24th at 5 p.m., a balloon theater program. I've got someone coming, a performer coming in. She's gonna make all kinds of things with balloons for the kids, and balloons are often very popular, so it should be a lot of fun. Last thing I wanna mention, if you're not someone that likes food, you're not gonna like this, but I have a cooking demo coming in on Saturday, June 22nd. He is, the chef, he's going to be preparing grilled peach salad with miso dressing and a side of lavender lemonade. Sounds delicious. I'll be here. And if no one comes, it's more for me. But he'll have samples, it'll be lots of fun, and he shows everyone how to make it. He's really good. So other than that, that's what I've got. Any questions, comments, concerns? Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna shuffle this up in here. We're gonna move the announcements and correspondence up.
There were several, now I can't seem to find it here. Here we are. Several things have come in. The county provided the link and the information on the county's concept draft for the CSD. They want our responses back by the end of June, so we're going to convene. First of all, we're asking the community to please look at the concept draft. The link is provided on the website, Town Council website. It's also on the county website. And we're soliciting input if people have concerns or they like it. It's always good to hear like as much as not like, to let us know, because we have to provide comments back to the county by the end of this month.
And we had one committee meeting last week. And
Yes.
we're gonna have a second that we'll be announcing shortly once Kelly's back.
Later on in June. And we're also hoping, we had talked about having convening a public meeting where we could just,
Yeah.
sometime after the second committee meeting, to sort of go over what we've heard. And maybe we can do it the next town council meeting. I don't know how full the agenda is,
Yeah.
or we can have a special meeting just for that. The CSD team did a presentation at the ARTC meeting last week. It looks like their goal is to have the Acton CSD done by the third quarter of 2020. Just not bad. I'm happy. A regional planning's comment deadline again is 28 June. If new issues have arisen, they can still be added. They should be included, however, they should be included with the comments submitted on or before June 28th. So that's why I was thinking if there are things that we want to add, you know, because with the SCA ordinance, things have happened. A lot of things changed last week, or 2 weeks ago, whatever it was. That's why we should have a public meeting to talk about what those things might be. At the ARTC meeting, there's also an announcement, and Chuck maybe can speak better about this than I can, but there's handouts from an organization working at the Mark Taper Foundation Shelter Resource Bank for homeless. And the people who were giving the presentation at the meetings, they seem to be interested in doing a lot more outreach on homelessness issues within communities, how they look, because homelessness here in Acton is different from, Little Rock. And, we have a lot of large campgrounds, and we know people are living there, so some of our homelessness is actually, they're not intense, but so she seemed very surprised by that. So she might be reaching out to us, but there's information here, and so please be aware that if you have concerns with homelessness, have experienced homelessness, know about homelessness in Acton, please consider sharing your thoughts with us so we can convey them to this organization. Chuck, if you want to add.
Well, the organization called Shelter Partnership, I think they get a grant from the Mark Taper Foundation to do some other work down in the Bell area. But anyway, the organization is called Shelter Partnership. We, and I think that's the 5th District, has hired them to come up with a homelessness plan for the unincorporated Antelope Valley, because there are homelessness plans that the 2 cities have done. We haven't done one for the unincorporated areas. The city said, hey, what's up with this? So the 2 people from Shelter Partnership, Ryan and Ruth, are going around talking to town council members, churches that deal with the homelessness, nonprofit organizations that deal with the homelessness, the cities and whatnot, and they're looking at what county services are out there. They're looking at a whole bunch of stuff. We have not seen what they're coming at. Ruth is very interested in the idea of campgrounds. She's interested in campgrounds.
Yeah, she was very
Yes,
all
yes,
over that.
yes,
Surprising.
yes.
So
I think, yes. I think it might be campgrounds is like a place to put homeless people. I don't know, but. Anyway.
oh my goodness,
So-
that's just the opposite.
Yeah, I know that it's just the opposite, yes. So,
Because in our campgrounds, we have a lot of Megan's Law people.
Well-
And
Yeah.
And we have a lot of school buses stopping at
And
us.
so, and I don't know if there's hookups for permanent camps there. Are there sewer hookups on, like at Thousand Trails?
Yeah.
There
I
are?
have pulled
Okay.
I have pulled the CUP records and the Thousand Trails. Most of the septic systems date back.
But they do have
Facilities.
septic tanks of some sort. There's not just like people are expected to leave every week and dump their tanks and come back again.
I don't know what state their septic
Yes,
tanks
okay.
are in, so
Alright.
there might be some of
There's
that
some sort
going
of
on
thing
too.
there, yeah. And so.
Because a lot of their septic tanks are actually in the river mountain
Yes,
area
yes,
too, so.
and they would not be allowed nowadays, yeah. And so, just on my own personal thing, I keep saying, you know, there's a lot of trailer parks around the Antelope Valley, not campgrounds, but trailer parks that have been there for 50 or 60 years.
Like mobile home parks?
More
Is it-
trailer parks.
like
They
RV
might have
parks?
started as mobile home parks, but now they've got campers and RVs and maybe some single wides in there.
So,
And maybe they could use those because a lot of those have got empty spaces, you know.
when you say trailer parks, you mean RV parks?
RV parks, yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
As
As opposed to,
mobile home park?
yes.
Of which
I
we
think
have
these are
many of those.
combination, and they might have started off as trailer parks, when that was what people called them 60 years ago, and now they've got some single, because I've been looking at aerial photos of them, counting how many empty spaces in, as in, if the county took them over, fixed up the septic tanks, could we fit 8 people who now are living in an RV out in the middle of a former alfalfa field? Would that be a good place for them to move to, instead of living in the field with no sewage, no water, no nothing? But nobody's accepting that, that's just, you're shaking your head like.
Well, we've always taken the position, you know, the Thousand Trails CUP.
No, I wasn't thinking about Thousand Trails, because that's.
Well,
a
that's the
camp-
main, that's the main one, that's the
Yeah.
main camp
No,
right here.
Here,
And-
but I
and-
wasn't talking about campgrounds, I was talking about trailer parks
Well,
in the Antelope Valley.
Thousand Trails is an RV park too.
Yeah, I was talking about trailer parks in the Antelope Valley. You can tell that none of these are short-term places there, they're all long-term places.
Okay.
And they've kind of evolved over the years, so that the single wides burned down or moved out or whatever, and somebody's moved in there with his RV or his travel trailer, but nobody.
So that's a mobile home park that's now been converted to an RV park.
Yeah, I think they all started as trailers.
Because mobile home parks are not allowed down there, or
Probably not.
permanently fixed travel
Yeah,
trailers
these
either,
guys-
so.
these are all permanent, yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Interesting.
And then, the announcement was made at the ARTC meeting about the sustainability plan, which we're gonna be talking about tonight, which is a big thing. And, that's it for announcements. Oh, no, there was a resident identified concerns with the vacant parcel being stripped of all vegetation. I went by the property, it looks like, at the time I wrote this, it was 20% stripped, now it looks like it's almost 50%. They had a hose hooked up to the Waterworks District 37 hydrant. I couldn't tell if it was a meter on it. And the dust was horrendous, so I've got Rule 403, AQMD's closed today, so they'll be open tomorrow. And Dan Garinger is going to try to get out there tomorrow morning, because our CSD says that if you remove more than 10% of your vegetation at any one time, you have to get a minor CUP. Used to be just a brushing permit, but apparently they don't have those anymore. So, and according to Oscar, there's been no permit action on this property. So it's kind of it's a big concern because of the dust, and the neighbors are worried about, you know, when you strip out the vegetation, it's gonna be a mud flow, and it's 10 acres. So right next to a whole bunch of homes, and upstream of a whole bunch of homes. So anyway, so that's the other thing going on.
What area is that in?
Pardon me?
What area is that?
It's, west of Crown Valley, south of the 14. And that's it,
All
sorry.
right, that's all you got. Anybody else have any other announcements? No? Good. All right. Thank you, Jackie.
Sure.
All right, the Hefner Road project. No?
A couple things for you guys.
Thank you.
And I do have some handouts. You're more than welcome to take one or leave them on the table, and I'll pick them up when you're done if you don't want to keep it. All right, good evening. My name's Taylor. This is Chrissy. In December of 2018, we bought a house on Hefner Road, which is in Ravina off of Soledad Canyon. And right now, we're in the process of obtaining CUP, or a conditional use permit. Because there is a house that was on the property when we bought it. It was built in 1980, and it was built completely without any permits, and they built it too close to the property line. So we are getting a conditional use permit to meet the setback requirement that's in the Acton CSD. So regional planning has asked us to come here because the Acton Town Council is a public advisory board to let you guys know about the project, open it up to any questions, and basically just let you know kind of what's going on down there. That's about it.
So what's the setback then?
The current setback is 3 feet.
3 feet.
The Acton CSD requires the front and rear yards to be 50 feet, so that's why we're doing the conditional use permit.
And have has the county identified any concerns or?
No concerns now. We do have electricity to the property. We have water, health department approved well. On the back of your handout, there is this is just for the board members, there is the contact for our case planner for our regional planning, in case you want to reach out to him with any questions as well. And there's access to the property. Waste management also serves it for solid waste, and we have all utilities there.
And on, my eyes aren't as good as they used to be. It looks like it's kind of flat, the topography.
Yes, ma'am, it's kind of a couple rolling hills, but for the most part, it's flat.
So it shouldn't cause any, I don't know what that would be, but downstream concerns, because.
You're correct. Our development that is taking place in the CUP has no grading required to the existing area. So the house will remain and there won't be any necessarily moving of dirt or anything like that.
And the fire department, the hammerhead, is that already there?
No, we're bringing that in now
Okay.
with the service. We do have space for a fire department turnaround in our driveway, and our grade for our driveway is less in percentage than is max. So
Less than
we're-
10%.
Correct, so we're all good.
Now, have you heard any concerns or support or anything from your neighbors? Or
Definitely a lot of support from the neighbors. The parcel before was uninhabited for probably about 10 years or 8 years. And there was people illegally dumping there, people just coming in and maybe looting, hanging out. So they are glad that we are in there now. Now we have cameras and, you know, motion lights and all that stuff. And we've met all of our neighbors and they're really happy that we are there, we're taking this project on, and that we are going to be hopefully a part of their community. Naomi, you have a question?
Oh, no, I just wanna say, my name is Heather, I'm from Pulsar, I'm a neighbor, and I support you guys.
Thank you very
on your
much.
CP being back there.
Thank you.
it would really make our job a lot easier if we heard, like, you could maybe email that to us. Because one of our objectives would be, or if you have neighbors who have expressed that to you, if they wouldn't mind dropping a line to the
Sure.
town council. Because it's always better when we can point to input from the community in terms of things that we're, taking a position on. So, maybe we could give the community a couple of weeks to hear. You're not scheduled for a hearing yet on your CP, are you?
No, not yet.
Yeah, because I think I was looking at the Energov report, I think it just came out a couple of weeks ago, right? March 25th. You're 29181 Hefner, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you guys just filed for the CUP recently, right?
It's been about 2 months, I believe.
Okay. And are they making you do a full CUP or a minor CUP?
It's a full CUP.
Maybe that's something we should look at. I mean, most places just have a variance.
Right,
But the threshold is supposed to be high, because we're not,
exactly.
but your situation's rather unique.
Right, we are very unique. The CUP was designed, or the CSDs were designed to protect Acton, protect the community from multifamily dwellings and shopping centers and all this. But they made the CSD so strict that if you didn't comply with any of it, you had to get a CUP. So even though we're only trying to get a 3-foot setback, we still need to go through all the check boxes as if you were developing a shopping center. So we are unique, but that is the process that we have to go through to do it.
Maybe we should look at that in the CSD thing, but
We can bring it up.
I'm sorry about that.
It's okay.
Okay.
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
When it's built, it's gonna be great.
That's right.
We're done.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we can, we have, normally what we do is we solicit community input, and then we wait a meeting or two and then take a position, so you have plenty of time.
I will reach out to them.
And can you email?
PDF?
Yeah,
Yes,
then we
we
can
will.
post that.
Yeah, well, but not the,
Not the,
not the last thing.
Yeah, no, I'm just the.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, and I have a lot more documents if you guys are interested too.
No, that's
Yeah, no,
okay.
it's just- yeah, it's great.
All right,
No, I appreciate the explanation too. That
thank you.
Cool.
And thank you, ma'am.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Do you wanna do the sustainability plan after Edison?
Yeah, let's do that.
Is there, I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah. Alright. Well, go ahead, if you guys are ready.
So good evening, thank you for having us back. My name's Liz Seelman, I'm a Government Relations Manager for Southern California Edison. We have a team of folks here tonight to help us sort of answer questions. They are there, and can you just self-introduce yourself, starting with Mike?
Mike Bjorky, local planning suit for Antelope Valley.
David Guerrero, Principal Manager, Aircraft Operations.
Jennifer Masterson, local public affairs.
Ray Pope, local public affairs.
Thank you. So we've received a few different concerns, issues, questions from the town council regarding some of the work that we're doing for part of our wildfire mitigation plan. And just as a very brief recap, we were here on December 17th. We made a presentation. At the time, it was called our Grid Safety and Resiliency Plan. We were talking about one, grid hardening, which basically means that we're making our lines and our poles more fire resistant. So we were changing out wood poles to composite poles. We were looking at putting covered conductor on some of our distribution lines. We also talked about our enhanced situational awareness capabilities. That was installing weather stations, high definition cameras, utilizing advanced weather monitoring. So all of these new technologies are going to increase our company's ability to monitor weather and the microclimates in our high fire risk areas, which Acton, of course, is one of them. It's also going to allow us to more accurately predict inclement weather conditions and identify and proactively repair our equipment. One of the other things we talked about was some new vegetation management practices, and then we also talked about our public safety power shutoff, which was mentioned earlier. And that's a preemptive shutoff of power during extreme weather conditions on high fire risk circuits. Since that presentation, so we can give an update of where we've been since December, SE has filed with the Public Utilities Commission our 2019 wildfire mitigation plan. That plan basically incorporates everything that I just spoke about, and it also builds off of it. And one of the things that's new is called the enhanced EOI, so our enhanced overhead inspection. We've been doing overhead inspections for a while, but we've enhanced the work that we're doing in advance of what we perceive to be an upcoming fire season. So enhanced overhead inspection, or EOI for short, is an inspection of all our overhead transmission and our distribution lines in our high fire risk areas. We started the ground inspections pretty much at the end of last year, and then we started aerial inspections about a month ago. Another question that we received, and so I want to address that, is why are aerial inspections necessary, important, and vital to the work that we're doing?
Actually, it was, why can't it be done with ground-based equipment?
Okay, I will answer that part. So we are doing ground inspections, and the reason that we've enhanced our operational inspections with aerial inspections is in part because we can't assess everything that we need to see from our equipment, basically from the ground looking up. So when we do aerial inspections, we are taking sort of a holistic vantage point in order to figure out what's happening on our poles themselves. And I have folks that can speak more to that in a minute. But that's one of the reasons. So again, just a little detail on how does it actually operate, how do we do our aerial inspections. So we have a 3-man crew in the air. That's a pilot, an observer, and then our cameraman. So the observer is basically looking out for livestock, other aircrafts, it's looking down the entire pole line, The helicopter pilot is obviously doing his job. When you look at our cameraman, so that gentleman is, or female, directs the team to focus on specific areas, including parts of our poles, our wires, our cross arms. They're looking for any signs of deterioration. Our cameraman is also using high-tech cameras mounted on the helicopter. These cameras can detect invisible flaws using a radiometric infrared camera, as well as visible issues using an HD imager. So basically, when we collect all that high-resolution data from the aerial inspection, that's video and still shots, we send those to a very large database where the information is collected, it's categorized by area and geospatial data. That gets taken back to SCE, our facilities at SCE, an inspection team with our transmission and distribution. They then assess that footage and the data to determine the health of the equipment. If any issues are identified, a work order is filled out, a crew is then sent to make any necessary repairs or upgrades that are needed. So that is what's taking place with those folks that are doing that aerial work. One of the things that we briefly spoke about again is we see things in the aerial inspections that you cannot see from the ground. So with this increased inspections, we're making absolutely sure that every effort is made to identify possible ignition spots in our high fire risk areas. As an update to where we are with our aerial inspections for the community of Acton, in this particular cluster, we have about 2 more days of aerial work ahead of us. We are expediting our work as much as possible in anticipation, as I mentioned, of the upcoming fire season. We've always had long-standing practices, all of our inspection practices, but the level of destruction that we have seen in the past 4 years based off these wildfires has really ramped up the work that we're doing. We're also working very closely with our regulators. We're working with the state. We're making sure that we're in compliance with many requirements, making sure that we're going above and beyond to protect the community and the public safety.
Question on that.
Yes.
So 2 more days left in this round. How often is this going, would this be occurring? Once a year? Once in 5 years? What's the?
How often do we
Yeah.
intend to do the aerial inspections? Okay, I'll answer that in 1 second.
Okay, no problem.
Because I want to invite some folks up who might be able to help me in answering some of those other questions as well. I just want to mention that we are very aware that there's been a lot of work taking place in the Acton community. This is a high fire risk area. We're doing grid hardening. We're doing some of these inspections, so we know that it's a big impact. But please know that the work that we're doing and the goal that we have, of course, is keeping the community safe by making our system more fire resistant. And that's the ultimate goal here. Can I ask a couple of you guys to come up? And I don't know if Dave would like to add anything to the question that just posed. And this is Ray as well. And they might be able to give a little more color on aerial inspections.
So I'm Dave Verona, the Principal Manager of Aircraft Operations, and I actually used to be a lineman, one of the guys that climbed those poles a few years back. So I'm not going to climb one now, let's put it that way. But the question about why we need to take a look from, basically it's taking a look from the top.
No, why doesn't it?
Things you cannot see.
Well, here's the problem. What you've told the PUC, and I have it right here, is that your infrared and your distribution inspection program will be done with ground-based infrared and ground-based equipment. You only have helicopter usage authorized and only requested for transmission infrared. Now, none of what you're looking at here in this community is transmission or even sub-transmission, it's distribution. And I haven't, this community, what it went through between 2009 and 2012 with an EIR for the Tri-Tip project that said there will be no helicopter operations any place where there is adjacent to a roadway, and it specifically mapped out the area of North Vincent, and that was completely ignored, and there were sometimes 100 helicopter trips a day going over people's homes. We had a couple of Vietnam vets, one of them which curled up into a ball, and his wife couldn't get him out of his shell because it was caused so many flashbacks for him. So this community has been just slammed by your helicopters. So when you use helicopters here at sometimes 150 feet off the deck or even less, in places where there are roads, paved roads, highways. And the permission you've asked from the PUC states categorically that these reviews will be done with ground-based equipment. And then in our town, you use helicopters. That's not okay. So it's really important for us to understand why you told the PUC this work will be done with ground-based equipment, and it's not being done with ground-based equipment, and why you're using helicopters in areas with roads right adjacent to them. Because in other places, you're not using helicopters to do this very same work. So this community is just done with Edison helicopters.
We do acknowledge the impact of the helicopters. I would comment that it's not limited to this community. The aerial inspections will be conducted throughout all the high fire risk areas. The areas that we prioritize, and the reason why Acton is one of the first communities, are the risk areas that we want to get to before the fire season.
The issue is not, we're thrilled that you picked us to do this first because we appreciate, obviously, fire protection. And when you came in December, we were very supportive and we gave you lots of ideas. You never mentioned helicopters because I would have been all over it like you can't imagine if you had. So it's not an issue of whether or not you're protecting us and putting us on the docket first. What the problem is, the gap is between what the public is told in your plan and what you actually implement, and what the PUC approved just last week. They approved your plan less than a week ago. So if you could address that, I would appreciate it.
Keep in mind that the plan is the first of an annual plan. We will be submitting fire prevention plans going forward every year. The helicopter inspections have been used in operations. There's some references there that we would even utilize helicopters for PSPS purposes.
What is PSPS?
The public safety power shutoff, for us to ensure that the lines are safe to re-energize. So helicopters have been part of our operations. I wouldn't say that the wildfire mitigation plan limits the use. It's what we propose that we will do, and in that plan does anticipate a holistic approach. It's not whether we will do helicopters or ground-based. All of the structures that we've inspected on the ground, on the distribution circuits, there's about 380,000 structures that we've already completed, including Acton. The helicopters and the wildfire mitigation plan goes beyond the compliance requirements.
So where is your plan for this helicopter work? Because it's not in this plan. And where's the CEQA document that goes with it?
Well, just like we have called out the enhanced inspection program in there, the helicopters as previously used in operations is also being used for inspections. So it's not a separate call out on helicopters because we also keep in mind the IR and the Corona and other technology that's referenced there. Those are looking at different parts of the infrastructure. Those are looking at electrical infrastructures. The helicopters are also looking at pole deterioration. Some of the things that we mentioned that we can't see from the ground is pole top deterioration, cross-arm deterioration that starts at the top of the pole. So we have conducted over 380,000 distribution pole inspections, but the helicopters go beyond that. And that's really the purpose of the wildfire mitigation plan, is to move us from a compliance-based, how many years, how often do we do that, to a risk-based model. So we may see opportunities where we could utilize new technologies or have more frequent inspections in high fire risk areas. Okay, so the plan, it is an evolving plan, and as we identified, we started the aerials like this, we said about a month ago, because we were finding that there were new technologies that we borrowed from PG&E and other territories that were finding things that we just weren't able to find on the ground. So if we're gonna utilize best practices, we have to be open to be utilizing either helicopters or drones, whatever can get us the closest inspection to those structures. But we have done ground inspections of all the structures in this area already.
So and I understand you're trying to get special permission or whatever the right word is from the FAA to be able to operate drones without a line of sight, so that you can send them down a whole line and you're not right next to them. But, and drones are of concern, but they're less concern, they're less disturbing than helicopters. The concern I have is none of what you just said is in anything that you've submitted to the PUC. And, you know, there's 10 parties in this, you know, a Turn and a whole bunch of other ones that are, and this proceeding's still ongoing. None of it's in there. So when are you going to
Well, we don't,
incorporate what
again,
you just said into what the PUC understands you're doing and what the community understands you're doing?
and we do intend to publicize it. We have energized Edison articles and we do some public outreach. But again, we're trying to move to a prudent system operator model.
And I am not questioning that. But what you do has to be, in this, specifically in this area, has to go through the PUC. Because that's the only point at which we, as a community, can see what's being approved, look at the environmental impacts and make comments. You know, we gave you all kinds of recommendations on this in December, and none of them really probably landed anywhere. But at least in a public hearing process and in a proceeding, our concerns and our issues actually are given, they're weighed by the decision maker. And the decision maker isn't Edison, it should be, and it is the PUC. So how are you, everything you just described about the enhanced everything, which again, in here says it's all gonna be ground-based. Your overhead inspections is overhead distribution is ground-based equipment. When is what you're describing going to be in a document that we can look at?
I don't think that document necessarily calls out all the methodologies for inspections. I would just say that helicopter inspections has been part of routine maintenance.
The proposal that was approved, the decision that was approved by the commission last week for this project states straight up that your distribution inspection will be done with ground-based equipment.
And that is being done. And
It doesn't say helicopter equipment.
If I may, helicopter's been a part of Edison's inspection program since 1959, all over the service territory.
Nobody in this town has experienced the helicopter usage on distribution lines ever. So you cannot tell the PUC you're doing one thing and then do something else. I'm trying to figure out how this can, our Facebook page has been lighting up about your helicopters for 2 months now, and it's bad. And so we don't have any place to comment other than complain to each other, which is pointless. So we need an avenue where our concerns will be heard and not just, you sent me to your website saying here's our aerial, and I think your photograph is on it or one of your staff. And it says right there, it's for remote areas. We're not remote. We have a freeway and 4 major highways going through our area. So even where you directed me and the town council is not justifiable. So.
Yeah, well, traditionally, like Dave said, we have used helicopters, so we've established that. Primarily in transmission areas. The increased awareness for high fire risk areas, as you know, the maps are determined by the PUC on what those high fire risk tier 2, tier 3 areas are. The approach that we took was we initiated those at the areas of the highest risk. Arrowhead, Menifee, and this area being our highest risk areas.
And we appreciate that.
And it will be expanded. Again, it may not be called out specifically for the distribution circuits. There is discussion on the PSPS, which are primarily distribution circuits, the use of helicopters to ensure safety before we re-energize. There are
That's after a shutdown.
Right.
That's not what we're doing here. That is something that would be, you shut down for 72 hours, we've used this gentleman's Generac, so we're in good shape. And then the winds have stopped, and so you send a helicopter down the lines. That's a 30-second thing. It's not 3 or 4 weeks or 5 weeks or whatever. So please, the comments that we're having, or I'm the only one talking about this at this point, it has nothing to do with you checking the lines after you've shut down for 72 hours. This is what you're doing, have been doing for the last 2 months.
Yeah, and it has been operationalized since, like Dave said, the 50s. However, this is the new normal. How often we're gonna do it, it depends on the fire season. We've had a lot of rain, there's a lot of combustion material out there. So whether, different years, but what we're not relying on is a fixed schedule. And I think that's where the problem on the compliance-based maintenance program, you're required to inspect something every so many years for different types of equipment. We understand we have to go beyond that. We're not gonna be here, I don't think, longer. You have 3 primary circuits here in Acton. As Liz said, we have a couple days to go, and then we have to continue that work throughout all high fire risk areas.
So are we looking at, we've been now for what, 2 months?
I
Helicopters?
believe we sent out the notice that work was coming in April. I think April 11th, we sent that to the town council.
That's
and
2
then-
months.
Yeah, but
It
there's,
wasn't until May.
And
Well-
we had hundreds of notices, and you weren't here to talk about it, so we couldn't even act on it, and it was never part of what you talked about, and it wasn't in your plan. So we've had
And I-
2
and I-
months now, and I'm just concerned, if this is the new normal, we're gonna have to put up with this 2 months a year, every year. That's not gonna work.
well, I don't think it was 2 months ago, but about a month ago, I got a call to investigate some flight operations. Unfortunately, the mention that was on social media that I was following up on didn't include the tail number. Now I'm putting the burden for you to look at tail numbers, but the problem that we ran into
I got tail
is
numbers.
there is other helicopter work that may not be related to the enhanced overhead inspection. We have a lot of pole sets in the area, and there's also a lot of
Wait, are
maintenance.
you saying you're pulling your distribution line with helicopters?
No.
That's what you do with transmission, not distribution.
Well, let me go there. We only do, distribution wire pulling in extreme situations, which would be up the side of a mountain, something like that. And we are doing pole sets, and the poles are remote enough where we can't get a vehicle into it. But that's all filed with the FAA and.
But that's not, there are no, 99% of the places in Acton are not that. So that is not a source of the helicopter disturbance.
You'd be surprised how many I actually do in Acton, quite a few. But, not to minimize that, but it's gonna be an additional to what you're seeing right now. Okay, because now the inspections are gonna be complete, there's gonna be remediation work happening afterwards. Okay, and remediation is replacing the things that we need to replace.
So you're telling me you need to use helicopters to replace distribution poles and pull distribution lines in Acton?
In some cases.
Okay, I'd like to see where those are. Because that is exactly, when we filed a complaint with the PUC on your helicopter use, I mean, we went all the way and showed that there were, you had helicopters hovering 40 feet off the ground next to places where cars were driving. And you had told the PUC that you wouldn't be using any helicopters in areas that were accessible by road. And so there's a big disbelief gap for me. So if you could provide those maps where you'll be replacing poles and lines using helicopters on distribution facilities in Acton, I would appreciate it.
If there is any remediation work that is gonna take place in Acton, I'll make sure that you get a copy of what that work's gonna be.
Haven't they already been doing it? They've been reconducting all over the place.
Not recently, but in past years, there have been lots of jobs in Acton. But they're usually one-off, it's like one pole.
They were replacing conductor all along Americana Place.
Cedar
and
Highway.
With we understood it was the coded conductor. So is that not remediation?
Yeah, that wasn't done with a helicopter.
No, I'm good, because it should have been, so
Yeah.
that's
So
good.
where we can not, we only use a helicopter for that kind of work is a last resort, when the other methods aren't going to work, okay? When we can't get equipment into a remote area, or we can't set up properly. I'm trying to remember the job, it's just outside of Acton, probably up the hill a piece, but there was a hilltop pole, and they had to pull wire to it, and I had to use a helicopter just for one span
Right.
from a roadway to a hilltop.
There might be a few, I'm not saying there
Yeah.
are none, but it's virtually zero.
But you're not gonna see the production work you saw from 2009, 2012.
Well, that's transmission, so.
Yeah, and it was production work where they're locked into that. This is more smaller work to do specific things, okay? And The helicopter group that I manage, that's what we do, the smaller, specialized things, okay? The high definition camera work, the IR camera work, pole setting.
Your plan says that's all done from ground base, every bit of it,
But
because you can look at it from the ground.
I tell you, normally, we've always been doing that since the 50s. Okay, it's not a special thing that we're doing there. That's the kind of work that we normally do.
So
And
how do
that
I
we're doing.
reconcile what you've told the PUC and what you're telling us?
Well,
Because they're not the same.
We will be doing IR work coming up from the ground.
Great.
We are doing that in addition to the aerials. We are looking at two different sets of equipment. The IR is not intended to look at the wood structures. It doesn't detect anything on wood structures. It's electrical. And so the primary purpose for the aerials is to take a look at the poles themselves. We're trying to minimize the need to do helicopter pole sets. One of the reasons why we want to use composite poles is because they're more resilient. Therefore, if we needed to replace them, then it would negate the need to come back again with the helicopters. That's the primary purpose for the composites, is access issues. So there are some poles.
So how is it you cannot see a wood pole from the ground?
It's the top of the pole.
The very top ground part?
Top of the cross arms, most of the cross arms are flat.
And you can't see that with a man lift because it's only 50 feet high.
Yeah.
Where you can't get a man lift too, and there's quite a bit of that.
There's 99% of them you can get a man lift to here in Acton.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah. Well, again, there's an efficiency with helicopters in doing that. It only
Okay,
takes
so
a minute to do that.
so now you're getting to it. Okay, and I'm gonna. You cannot have substantial environmental impacts on this community because it's more efficient for you, without having the PUC saying that's okay. Because helicopters are dangerous. I mean, they can fail because of bushing failures. They can fail, all kinds of, Edison flipped a helicopter and killed a guy down in Bouquet Canyon in 2009. Helicopters are dangerous, and when you hover right, I got a picture of you hovering right over our school, and 100 feet off the deck. They're when you have them in residential areas, and it's just for convenience, that's a problem for at least me, and I think for this community.
I think you kind of read something into what I said that wasn't there. Okay, it's not purely for convenience, but however, when you've got to do a bunch of poles that you cannot reach that way, you can't get a bucket truck to, you want to fly over those, and since you got a few more poles to go, you're going to get those. We are looking at different ways of doing it.
I agree with that. But you went up and down 3 times now so far, and I took pictures of it the other day, Crown Valley. It's entirely accessible by a bucket or man lift or whatever you want to call it. So I guess I'm going to ask you to please pick the places where you use helicopters very judiciously. Because if they're over county maintained highways, 4 lanes in some places, it's a problem for us. And we don't have any problem going to the PUC and asking them to take a look at this. Because,
yeah. No,
and I don't want to go there, trust me, we have plenty of things to do in this town without that.
No, we appreciate the impact, and the efficiency that we're getting to is also a process of methodology. So we're developing practices that hadn't been done before because of the need to develop the data and the risk assessments. So previously, if we were to go from structure to structure based on compliance dates, that's the inefficiency that we want to get away from. We want to be able to complete large areas and maintain a database that's more dynamic. And that's a big part of this mention, these images go into a database. It's that database that allows us to do risk assessments and determine which areas we need to prioritize for repairs.
Well, a concern I have is the last thing in the world I want this community to think is that I'm asking you these questions because I don't think what you're doing is necessary, because nothing could be further from the truth. But I also know that a lot of what you're doing can be done in far less impactful ways and still achieve the entire fire safety objective that you have. And it'll work for this community. And so I urge you to find ways to do these things without helicopters.
Question, so go back on the schedule, so to speak, or lack thereof of a schedule. So is it something like where there's gonna be some kind of like rating of like, hey, this pole needs to be done now. This one's like in the next 2-3 years, and then you'll start looking at it, and over time, it's going to kind of extenuate when they're going to need to be looked at. Is that
Yeah, the inspections of all of the structures in the plan calls for completion by 2019. Okay, so we've completed the majority of transmission inspections, the majority of distribution, and we started generation facilities from the ground. Okay, and add to that the aerial inspections, which will all go into a buckets, various buckets with compliance dates attached to it, and the different levels of priorities. A priority 1, if we find something from the air, a deteriorated pole, cross arm, etc., that poses an immediate safety risk, we have to remediate that. And then the priority 2s, typically we have 1-year compliance requirement, but we've moved that up to 6 months.
Yeah, and so, but in that scenario, as something gets, let's say a tier 1 gets replaced, that's then crossed off that we got to aerial that again for whatever length of time is determined necessary. So what would that typically be? A new pole goes in, let's say it's a composite pole. What are you guys must have some idea of what the burn rate would be on that and when you would need to.
Well, okay, so I think we're still developing that methodology, but included in the aerial inspections of the poles themselves is vegetation management, right? And aerials have existed in transmission corridors for a long time. Veg management pushes a different set of criteria, right? We're implementing new veg practices. So let's say we replace the pole, but we still have to come back to ensure that vegetation.
Yeah, but you can see that from the ground. I mean, I can look out in my backyard and go, oh, that tree looks pretty close to that.
Right.
So what I'm getting at is the getting away from the helicopter. Hey, we put a composite pole in. I'm assuming it's also probably deteriorate differently at a different rate than wood. That's why you're putting them in. So it's going to change and eventually kind of work itself into a much larger gap of time where we didn't have to worry about, or it's going to get pockets where there won't need to be, you might have these particular areas that, hey, yeah, they were tier 2 or tier 3, so yeah, they're going to have to get checked again. But these ones that we just replaced, there's nothing, we cross them off the list and they don't get worried about.
Yeah, and I think that's the goal with the risk-based analysis, right? Right now we're compliance-based, and so I could probably give you a date on how often and how frequently. Yeah. But if we start looking at our risk analysis, that's a different cycle. Again, this is an annual plan. We don't have that called out yet. Our primary goal right now is to complete all the inspections. And then we have schedules of remediation that's built into that. And that also includes other projects, existing projects outside of the wildfire mitigation plan itself. So, and some of these poles are being captured in those other projects as well. And hopefully those projects, we don't have to come back. I mean, we were already in the process of grid resiliency before we started the enhanced inspections. So now we're inventorying and capturing all that data to again, try to, I think we'll have a better scope, once we get all this data analyzed. But right now, it's really just focused on high fire risk areas and trying to come back, not on compliance.
So is it something we can ask you guys to come back once it's completed and give us like some idea of a percentage or particular areas that, hey, we know these zones are gonna have poles replaced, something that we can be able to communicate to the community so they have some expectations?
I'd love to. I know we got Mike here, he's a senior planner, he does a lot of the work. Again, EOI, the inspection part of it, it's just a small part. It initiates a whole slew of processes, and it's not just poles, but the overhead conductor. But part of the requirement of the SB 901 is extensive community outreach. We've got some PSPS meetings scheduled, and I think those topics will always come up.
Well, I'm going to ask for more, what Jeremiah did. Before you use helicopters again, I'd like to know where they're going to be used, why they're going to be used, and why you can't use ground-based equipment. So that the people, because your helicopter's been all over Acton on the Dulce, and I'm still failing to see the need for all of that. Some of it, I'm not going to debate or dispute, but you have to give this community a heads up on these sort of things. We have people who break horses here, right? And when a helicopter buzzes, and besides the safety and the equanimity of our community, there are a lot of other concerns. So I'm going to ask for that.
Okay,
in
well,
well in advance.
and and you could contact me, or I'll commit to that, you work with Liz. But my role on the team is the engagement portion of it. So typically we, engage with our local stakeholders, we also have corporate communications involved. And certainly in, sensitive areas, we're more than happy to do that.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Some of the other questions you had asked in the emails pertain to outages.
And
what that process looks like, so I wanted to invite up Maria just
That would be
to
great.
share a
Because
few
we-
words with the community about outages, what that looks like, what the process looks like, how you can get notified quicker. Yes, sir.
That'd be great.
Just real quick, because I want to compliment Southern California Edison when they did our house, it was on Sunday, we got the notice, website, it says 9 to 3, and they got done early, did a good job. What I'd like to see is you extend that to the use of the helicopter, because I came home from work one day and had a red helicopter hover 100 feet above the house for like 40 minutes.
Yep.
And then he took off, and then came back and hovered again. And the animals the horses were upset, the dogs were hiding in the back. It was very, very loud, and I had no idea what was going on. I knew it wasn't police, because I didn't see any markings we had no idea who it was. I thought maybe was there an accident on the road, but the fact that I was not acknowledged or told what was happening, and you do such a good job of one thing, why don't you have it on the other?
No taken, for sure. Yes, sir.
Okay, the other day, a blue and white helicopter that said fire on it was hovering over my area. Is that yours?
No, I don't believe it is. If it has fire on the bottom, usually it's
There was helicopters, there was a fire helicopter hovering over Aliso some time ago, practicing water targeting, targeting
No,
water.
this is it here. It's just a blue and white helicopter with no tail number, but underneath it said fire.
Could you email that to the, well, investigate
That's
that.
not one of the county fire.
Yeah.
And I might have had the same helicopter over the Lundy Water Ranch property maybe a week or two ago, and one of my coworkers said that maybe it was fire looking for people not complying with weeds or making sure that the clearance of brush and weed, but
Yeah, there
The
you go.
fire-
So
the
they need a helicopter to snoop your property.
I can't say that's for certain. That was just a theory. So, but we had the same
Anyway, so
issue.
Edison came and replaced all of the distribution, whatever, transmission lines, whatever, on my property, and they ran over all kinds of my crap. So as far as I was concerned, I wasn't very happy.
So they've reconducted in your area?
Oh, yeah.
So, how can that happen? I mean, how, you
Well, they're
went over his
contractors.
lawn, or what you're?
Well, they're contractors, and they're doing their thing, and then, if they run your stuff over, it's like, hey, what the hell?
Well, can
Oh,
you
well.
work with him to replace whatever got
I
destroyed?
don't care. At this point, it's like, I'm just happy bitching about it.
That's not okay with me. I want this stuff to stop. I mean, this community has been, half the tri-tip segments were in this town. And I couldn't get Edison to even recognize that Vincent was part of Acton for 2 flipping years. So we've been stomped on by you guys.
Isn't that possible?
Beyond belief, huh? No, don't. I don't know who you are, but don't mess with me.
Let me touch base with you after we
Oh,
step off
don't
here,
worry
just
about
to
it.
get.
It's all said and done. They're gone.
Can you send that, because I want to know who that helicopter is, I'll contact them. Because the county fire, they have tail numbers.
Right,
And I
there's
thought,
nothing.
I'm trying to remember what color, because I don't,
Yeah.
that seemed to be all the discussion online was what helicopter, and lots of people posted different, like, the yellow and white ones are so-and-so, the blue and white ones are so-and-so, the red,
The movie ranches were getting blamed for most of them, which is,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a blue and white
We got
helicopter.
turned in,
Yeah.
somebody thought we were filming on the ranch, but actually, I don't know if it was your helicopter or somebody, but we had an inspection because of it because there was a helicopter hovering so low, it looked like
something.
something, like we were doing something wrong.
Yeah.
It wasn't us
very
that-
low.
Yeah, we didn't know.
I mean, I told them they're number one. There's no doubt about it.
could you mind emailing that to the town council email? I'd appreciate that.
So to outage notifications, as the gentleman said, we passed around a flyer, and we do really urge everybody to go into their outage, to their SCE account, the My Accounts, and enroll to receive outage notifications. That's gonna assist you for a couple of things. If you are scheduled to receive a maintenance outage, you'll get the notification 7 to 14 days in advance. As soon as it hits our system, you will receive a digital communication, as the gentleman said he did. In the event that there's an emergency, or there is a in the event that we have to send out public safety power shutdown notifications, and or you have a repair outage, we lean on the outage contact information to send out those notifications, because we don't have time to send out a mailer. So if you are not enrolled to receive outage contact in this method, you will not be receiving those notifications. Part of that, we also are doing what we're calling our Dear Neighbor program. We've actually been doing that for about 2 years now.
DRDA, what did you say?
Dear Neighbor, a Dear Neighbor
Oh, Dear
program.
Neighbor, oh.
And that's an additional ad hoc communications that we've been utilizing as well with the fire safety mitigation team and the aerial inspections. So when we are gonna be in that area, we're gonna either proactive, or when we're in that area, we're gonna try to utilize that type of communications to let the community know that we're gonna be doing either aerial inspections or additional programs or enhancements that are happening in your community. But keep in mind, we use this type of communication. So I really wanna urge everybody and let your neighbors know as well to go into their My Account and enroll to receive outage notifications, because this is gonna be your best method of communication, receiving communication from SCE.
Well, regarding helicopters, I'm going to get it from my new friend here, way in advance. But
You will, but they need to know too.
But a couple of things. Many people in Acton now are not with Edison anymore. So how are you going to contact them if they don't have an Edison account?
But you still get billed for Edison.
No,
We're shared customers.
Okay, I just wanna make sure that it's transparent there, see there, okay. I figured that was the answer, but I need to ask it. A lot of times mail does not work in this town. We have mailboxes stolen and mailboxes broken into. So why can't you put up a sign saying power outage on Monday, 4 or 5 days early, so people driving home will see it. And please don't tell me, because you're gonna be alerting the thieves about that, because you already have that information on your website. This is where the power's out.
Not for maintenance. We don't have that for maintenance. And a maintenance outage, if you don't have that 6-digit outage notification number, you cannot go into your address and then it'll pop out. It will pop out the day of, but not advance.
My husband found your map of outage without the code, so.
It's there, but it won't pop out like that 14 days ahead of time for maintenance. Now, if it's a repair, then it's gonna be there, but it doesn't have that granular detailed information. It won't say, this is a home, or the back, you can't see your backyard.
No,
It's
but
more
you can do it in a
wider.
whole neighborhood.
Yeah, we cannot do those signs like that. It's
And
a
why
safety
not?
concern. It's a safety concern
And what is the safety concern?
because of the theft. There was actually a utility company up in the East Coast that did that granular detailed information, and they started seeing high theft in that community.
I'm not
So
asking for
Edison
granular
opted out.
detail, I'm asking for a sign, this neighborhood, a part of this neighborhood will have power outage, just to let people know. Break Acton up into 6 parts, and so it's not granular. You might only have a power outage in like 3 blocks, but you'll notify 12 blocks.
It's something we could definitely take back to the team, but it's not something that we're doing right now, but we could take a look at it at a
So
later time.
what is your other alternative, since mail is not always a great option in
This
this
one.
town?
And what happens if people aren't online? There's a lot of.
Because of power outage.
people in the community.
There's still a notification that gets sent. Can you share the
So
hard
we
copy?
have I'm sorry?
Can you share like a hard copy notification?
So we have mailers that do go out to the mailing address, and we do have mailers that go out for the ad hoc communications, which is the Dear Neighbor program. We still use either the service address of impact or your mailing address to receive those communications. The other option, as you're saying, if people are not on the, are not in digital, we, Edison, our team, the outage communications team, we actually work with the city and the counties, and they are actually giving all outage impacting the geopolitical area, and they have all of that information, but it's in the city or the county.
So we have to get it from the county.
Well, is there any way that you
Okay,
guys
Chuck.
have phone numbers on file that you could do a call out? Because I would assume that if somebody's not online.
Those
most
call,
everybody's phone.
thank you for that, we actually do call outs
Okay.
as well.
Is
And
that-
when
How far
outage
in
is
advance?
impacted on a Friday or Saturday, the call outs are done on a Friday.
Wait, how far in advance do you do the call out?
The call outs are done twice, they're, when the outage is scheduled online, so it's between 7 to 5 days, and then we also do a 24-hour call out,
7 to 5 business days or days?
7 to 5 business days.
So it's a
Week
week,
and a half.
because now.
And we do a 24-hour as well.
This
And
whole,
this is 24-hour notification as well.
this whole thing started because I got a notice on a Friday afternoon of a shutdown on Monday. And then Tom had that happen to him today. And he got the notice on Friday. So it's not working, whatever it is you think your system is. And when I spoke with several people at Edison. They said, your notice went out May 10th at 11:42. And I said, well, that might have been when you printed it, but I sure didn't get it then. And there's no postmark. So it's like you can say it, it doesn't happen, but we have to live with it. So that doesn't work for me.
Again, we're doing the hard copies. You have the ability to sign in online at rsce.com. That will give you an even quicker notification, is the understanding. So we're doing the online, we're doing the telephone, we're doing the mailing.
Okay.
I think we're trying to cover all bases.
And we send the notifications to the county as well.
Yes, sir.
So we'll go to the county.
Real quick, so the notification is in email form or is it like a text message out of curiosity?
It's your choice.
Okay.
So you go on and you log onto your account, and you could do phone call, landline, you could do your mobile, you could do
Okay.
text, or you could do email. It's your
Because like what
preference.
Jeremiah said, like this is a unique community and a lot of people either don't do internet or
Yeah.
email.
Or can't.
Or can't,
Yeah.
because they're just not accessible. I don't know if you guys have access to Nixle, Nixle is what the county uses for all notifications and stuff.
No,
And I think a lot of people already signed up on that and they put all sorts of blasts on
Do
there.
they put power outages?
Yeah,
in
they
there?
I'm saying that, I don't know if I don't think I've ever seen one, but I've seen stuff that's less important than
Yeah.
power outages.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nixle, even though a lot of public agencies use it, it's a private platform.
Okay.
And we haven't been able to negotiate any distributions with them.
If somebody did not have internet access and they wanted to sign up for like the phone note, could they just call in and
Yes,
get
they
it done
can.
to that?
Mhm.
So
And
I'm
if it
gonna,
goes to a landline, correct me if I'm wrong, if it goes to a landline and somebody does not answer, the answering machine,
Voicemail, yeah.
the voicemail will take it, yes, there will be a voicemail.
so I've been asked to ask several questions by people who aren't here. So in many areas, you've already had 2 shutdowns in less than a week from 8 in the morning to sometimes 8 at night. So how many times in this process, on average, will an Acton, or what's the worst case an Acton resident will have shutdown? Is it going to be twice a month for the next 6 months, or what's?
Well, but that was part of the grid resiliency project, right?
It was last week, and it was today, so whatever that, you have two proceedings. You have the grid resiliency, and then you have the wildfire mitigation. So you answer for both, I don't care which.
So wildfire mitigation, what we're talking about tonight, enhanced inspections, won't require any shutdowns, right? So you wouldn't be getting a shut off for inspection.
Okay, so whatever we're getting shut-offs for, it's never been clear, so.
The grid resiliency programs, I would say 2, depending on where that person is at on the circuit, is probably the most they'll experience.
Okay,
Okay.
so I'm just really unlucky.
Yeah, there's some people live in an area that may have 2 circuits, or if we have to. So typically we do a string of poles. There'll be 2 switches in at some point, and if you happen to be in an area that we have to switch off to replace that conductor that's close to a substation or some sort of tap line, you may experience more than one. In my experience on cutover projects where we're actually rebuilding the system, is most people 2, I would say, is probably more than normal. I mean, normally we just take you down to replace that transformer, that conductor that's feeding your house. Again,
Okay.
Dave's a transmission guy, but he reroutes people all the time. But we typically only need to take it down to one. So I would say 2 is probably about as much as.
Okay, well, that's good, so, cause I had it on a Monday and then the following Monday, and Tom had it last Monday and today, and you had it twice. We're
Yeah,
just the
there's-
unluckiest people in town. But
Sometimes-
we weren't, my takeaway is, this isn't gonna be every couple of months or every month this will be happening.
No, once we replace that transformer, you're good to go for the next, hopefully 15, 20 years. The only other time that we would take you down is we install a shoe fly, basically temporary power,
Cut over.
right?
Or what if, like, you identified a pole as a tier 1 issue on the aerial, now you're gonna swap out the pole?
Yeah, hopefully we've already got that grid resiliency program plan, right? And then when they say
Okay, so
tier
you'll be able
1,
to-
we try to bundle that
Okay.
as best as we can. And as far as the work that we're identifying through the inspections, we're gonna try to bundle those as well as opposed to taking 1 or 2 poles. It's not good for us, it's not good for the customers. There's a whole new emphasis right now on the customer side of this. I think in the past, we probably just said, get those things done, right? And people experience 2 or 3 or 4 sometimes. But like I said, like a shoe fly, sometimes we try to put you on temporary power if we're working in our section. We'll take you down once to install the shoe fly and then take you down again to take the shoe fly off. It's just basically a bypass, right?
But those are, shoe fly connections are very quick.
Yeah,
Not
well, it still
12
takes,
hours.
it still takes, it's an all-day process most of the time. We just do it and leave lighting us overnight.
So the other.
Can you explain the PSPS program?
Public safety power is shut down. And the outage update that Maria just mentioned is a big component of that. There was a story on NPR today. And all of us, SDG&E, PG&E, our primary focus right now is to update our communication system, okay, to get those notices out. So Liz can talk more about it.
We went into detail in December on PSPS, and we're happy to do it again. And there's a lot of information at SCE.com/wildfires. It'll give you the whole rundown of what the public safety power shutoff is. But in short, what public safety power shutoff means is that under the most extreme of conditions, Edison may proactively shut off power on particular high fire risk circuits. And there are high fire risk circuits here in Acton, so this is a community that would be impacted by public safety power shutoff should we decide to implement that based off of a number of weather predictions, models, weather stations, some of the cameras that we have out.
Distribution circuits.
Distribution circuits.
Well, I asked that
Yes.
question in December, and that's the answer I got back.
And
So-
that was a true statement in December, and hopefully it will be true moving forward, but as we've mentioned here, it's an evolving process based off of what the needs are. So there is potential that things could change.
Well, I know you
Again.
de-energized transmission lines
Right
for
now
fire,
it's-
so.
Right now, we are looking at distribution
And
lines.
because I got it right here, I got an internal letter here, it's talking about the 15% humidity with 25% or 25 mile per hour winds for a duration of 8 hours or more, which, what are we doing?
What side are you
That's
reading
here,
at?
that is here.
That's not an Edison side, and that's not accurate.
I got a letter, I'm not gonna say what
Edison.
company, but it was an internal letter, and the
From
reason I'm saying
Edison.
is because my grandparents
I'm
lived
sorry,
out here too,
is
so.
that a letter from Edison?
What's that?
Is that an Edison letter?
Yeah, talked to Scott Brown and Troy Whitman.
Okay.
All right, those
So,
guys.
yeah,
So those
so-
guys.
Let me clarify
Well, there's a
that.
difference between a power safety power shutdown and the SOB 322, which is the wind as well. But not just because there's a red flag warning in the area doesn't mean PSPS is gonna take effect and turn off the power. That's two separate processes and programs that are not linked together.
So, one other thing to note, so the public safety power shutoff, that process starts internally with an SCE prior to anything actually taking place externally. So we start monitoring weeks out in advance, the weather, the forecast, the modeling systems that we have. So all that is taking place, and then when we're somewhere in the ballpark of 7 days, 7 to 10 days out, that's when we determine the weather prediction looks like it may still continue, there may be a need for PSPS, and that's when we start notifying folks about the process. We initially notify elected officials, cities, your information is on there as well, the town council, so that they have a heads up that this may be coming, please prepare. And then somewhere in the ballpark of 2 to 3 days out, we're sending out our first notifications to community folks. Again, if you're signed up through the automatic online, you're gonna get that information quite a bit quicker.
This will be the only way you will receive that notification. So you'll get a 2-day notification letting you know that your circuit that feeds your house or your business is being looked at, and we're monitoring that specific circuit. 1 day out, if you are no longer on that watch list, we will send you another email or text, whatever your preferred method is, letting you know that you're no longer on the watch list. If you still are on the watch list and have potential of a shutdown, we will let you know that we are still monitoring that circuit. Those will be the 2 only notifications that you'll be notified until your power is off. And then that will be the 3rd notification letting you know that your power is not, well, you will know you don't have power because the power is not there.
Yeah.
And then the 4th and final notification is letting you know that you've been restored.
One other thing I'll just say about that letter, and again, I'm not sure who he was sending that actual letter to, but we understand there's different winds in the Antelope Valley versus, the coastal communities and, down in the valley. So we have a very granular understanding of what the weather conditions are in particular areas. The wind's always blowing up here. So that may have been directed to different folks in a different community.
Well, it says, there's a spot on it where it gets a higher guidelines for LA County, excluding Antelope Valley. And the part I just read right now was specifically Antelope Valley.
Yeah, and in that evaluation, including the weather, including, the weather monitoring stations, it's a very dynamic environment. And then I think what Scott and Troy may also be referring to is we also have people on the ground, right? So it's actually takes somebody that takes a look. I mean, it may be windy here in Antelope, but whether the risk exists, whether that high wind, low humidity area actually has ignition sources, they'll have a groundman, a troubleman actually identifying which circuits. Now, the benefits of some of this grid resiliency work is to install new equipment that gives us better intel and also allows us to isolate smaller parts of the circuit, right? I mean, as it is now, we take a circuit down, we don't have that much control over the entire area. There is discussion. The article or the story on PG&E was they were talking about transmission level. Okay, we haven't entered that area, but in terms of sub-transmission or even a substation level, which would do 2 or 3 circuits, that's being looked at by the PUC.
One other thing I'd note is this last year, we can take sort of as an example here for the community, because this public safety power shutoff is something that we've been looking at in the past year. There's been high winds for sure throughout this past year, and it hasn't actually been implemented in this community. So again, just in terms of reference on what we're looking for in terms of this.
Well, another factor is that a lot of the Antelope Valley is not very high fire hazard.
Correct.
Out in the
Yeah,
desert,
further
flat.
out to the
Well,
desert, if you're on
it's
Lancaster
mostly
Mountain.
Antelope Valley, when you're not in the foothills, when you're in the flats. So their situation is different.
Sure.
So you're gonna cause big concern in this town if it sounds like it's gonna be 25 miles an hour, so.
Communications wise, we've gotten that down to pretty small parts of the circuit. And again, that's probably been more of the challenge, is to make sure our database, our transformer load database, and your contact information is correct, right?
So could you provide this in PDF and we can put it on our website? And do our part. I mean, we don't have that many subscribers, so it might not get very far, but. Yeah. And I have more
You can
questions.
put it in the Facebook group too.
Yeah.
Well, I don't do Facebook.
Got it.
So all of this is gonna start this summer, these outages?
Well, no, PSPS has already started.
Okay.
That's an existing program.
Okay, so my question is, we're in June, and if we're facing the possibility of having no power, that also means no water, no toilets, no water for horses. Are we talking for a couple of hours at a time, or are we talking like a whole day?
72 hours.
Because if we're talking about needing a $10,000 generator, I know I don't have $10,000 laying around, and neither do any of my retired neighbors, and I don't think any of my neighbors even know about this. So how is the public getting notified and educated on this new requirement?
Go ahead. You can say it, and I'll say from
are in a high fire circuit, communications was sent out last year. There will be additional communications that are gonna be sending out annually, and that campaign is being pushed out, I believe, in May, June?
It's going
I mean,
out
we're
right
already
now.
in May. So
Yeah.
June is gonna start going out. So you will receive a letter being mailed out to your mailing address,
Okay.
letting you know about the process, contact information, more detail of the information you're asking.
Okay.
Well, but I
And
think her
over 3
question,
days? Is that what you said, 3 days?
So how long is we don't know how long it
no,
would be.
you
It
told
would
the
depend very
PUC
much on the
72
weather.
hours.
Up to 72
Up
hours
to
because it may
72
take
hours.
us that long to ensure that the power
It's safe to turn back on.
So
is
there's,
safe to turn back on.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
once we turn it off, our safety mechanisms
Right.
are not monitoring the line. We don't know at that point if there's a down line. So we send up a helicopter
Right.
or a troubleman to inspect the route before we could turn it on. And that's what's adding to the duration. I think the instances now where we've been monitoring the situation has been very limited. I personally can't recall, I haven't been active on a PSPS activations. I've had,
So we did two. One
Two.
was 12-hour and the other one was a 36-hour.
but you don't send the helicopter out until the red flag conditions are done, or the Santa Ana's or anything. So you have to wait, and that might sometimes take 36 hours.
yeah, and
So-
but we acknowledge the use to expedite it with helicopters, but troublemen are also
Yeah,
out there.
that's- Usually it's a
There will be a
children
ground
out first.
inspection.
So what Jean's,
I guess
Jean
the answer
answers-
to that particular question is,
Yeah.
the weather conditions have to be deemed safe. So we can't control the weather, but as the weather changes, the wind dies down, whatever that situation may be, then we know it's safe to go back in, make an assessment of the line, see if everything's in safe and good working order, and then we will re-energize that circuit. But we have to make sure that the conditions have changed. If they're the exact same conditions when we decided to shut them off, then we're in the same place.
But I think what Jean's concern is that most people in this town are on wells,
Right.
which don't work if there's no power. So they have their water that the fire department needs, but after 2 days, they've been using their water and it hasn't been refilling. And then they could get tagged by the fire department for having some levels of water. And what's the solution for that?
Well, even with the tanks, we have a 5,000 gallon tank, but we can only use 2,500 because the valve for the bottom half of the tanks for the fire department.
Right.
So we don't get all that.
And
Yeah,
then
so-
there are water
100
haul,
gallons of water in 3 days.
and then there are water hauling companies here, but they also need power to pump the water to their trucks. And so if their power is turned off,
Right.
they can't even provide water.
And we're,
So we're working with not only public affairs within SCE, but we have a different department called our Business Customer Division, and they have been working for the last year with all of the water agencies in and around the Antelope Valley to make sure that they know the process, how we can sort of supplement our work with them.
Well, these aren't
We're working with
agencies.
them.
So the.
Yeah, no, I understand he's
yeah.
an individual.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
do understand
Okay.
that.
So can you reach out to our water haulers? We have 3 of them.
There's at least 3 private
Sure.
companies.
I mean, there's one in Agawase, but in Acton, there's 3.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
somehow we can you make that connection?
yeah, and keep in mind the PSPS is of last resort. I mean, it's not something that we're looking forward to. It's not our answer to wildfire resiliency. Grid hardening, grid resiliency, some of the equipment that we're installing.
Does all that resiliency and like the, all the work you're doing for mitigation, I'm assuming it's taken into account when you guys are looking at things for shutting things down. In other words, an area that hasn't been touched, you're probably gonna be more apt to say, hey, yeah, we're gonna pull that because it looks like it's gonna.
Yeah, there's a lot of equipment. I mean, the covered conductor, that is,
Yeah.
that minimizes ignition from conductor. Some of the switches and our cycle time, the resets, the fuses, all of that equipment is being looked at in terms of minimizing ignition sources, right? And that's really the emphasis for enhanced inspection as well, is what kind of ignition sources are around the structures as well. Again, PSPS is a last resort. Outage notifications, Maria does a really good job in her group, is intended to prepare you. As much as we strive for 100% reliability, we cannot guarantee that, and so we have critical care customers, we have other customers that are public safety agencies that we're engaging with right now to see what their needs are in terms of generation. We, in the past, did not provide or have limited generation as backup because it wasn't required. We're not looking at things as a requirement anymore, but if there is a public facility that needs to maintain power, we're looking at how we could switch around. When you get an outage notification, it's to let you know, please prepare for this outage, and whether that's a water pump, oxygen tank, or anything like that. We got a lot of troublemen. Sometimes they carry a generator on the truck. Sometimes they're able to serve people, but a lot of times they're just, we're in the business of trying to prepare you for that, right? But at the end of the day, I had an outage at my house last week. I got a generator. My brother gave me a hard time. He had an outage that same week. My generator was still in the box. And I live in a condo in Pasadena, not in Edison territory, and the transformer blew, right? And I had a generator. I thought I was gonna use that thing for tailgating or camping. I just told my wife it was for the house. But yeah, you don't know. I mean, a transformer going out.
We are having more conversations about the potential to help serve folks during those times.
Well,
And that has happened in this community for a few individuals, and then of course community centers. So we've had those conversations. The supervisor's office has come to us with some different concerns they perceive, and we've been trying to be accommodating of those folks because we know
Well,
there's
then,
a lot going on.
not ideal, but a mitigation for the issue Gene was raising is to make sure the water haulers don't go down, because they can serve, the 400 people or in a week. I don't know what your rate is, but that might solve the problem that Gene has when they're out of water after day 2. And
so we have folks that can send some information, but you have we'll get your information.
And
that's
Yeah.
That's mine.
But keep in mind that we do want, part of us letting you know in regards to the power safety, power shutdown, is we want to encourage you as a community to become resilient during these events. Keep in mind that right now, we're talking about the 72 hours, but God forbid an earthquake happens, God forbid a catastrophe happens. How are we now gonna further assist the community with being resilient during that time frame?
well, Edison has been very
So all
generous.
of that is what we're also here, and we want to encourage you to take a look at those processes as well, as individuals.
Well, Edison's been very generous and contributed to our community's, emergency response, whatever, carts or whatever. We got one down there and one up here. So you've been very helpful on that. We're a fairly hardy breed because we live where we live on dirt roads, because we don't live in Pasadena. So we're
We got outages too.
we're a little bit more resilient than you might think, but true resiliency is very expensive. So so if you could help the water haulers not lose power, so that Gene can get water and the other 1,000 people who need water, I would
Use your
appreciate it.
bathroom either.
Huh?
You can't use your bathroom either.
Well, you could maybe buy hauled water if you have electricity. But not if they don't have power. So if you could help with that would be great. Now, I've been asked a couple of questions, asked to ask these questions. So every time that I've spoken with somebody, except for who we just heard from, that the power would be on by 4, it's usually not on until 8. So the request has been made that if you think it's actually going to go till 6 or 7, please say that on the notice, and not every notice that's come out has been it'll be on at 4. And I guess we heard tonight somebody got it done early, but everyone else has been 7:30, 8.
So when we do the outage notifications at the beginning, it's, the estimate time that's gonna say it's 4 o'clock. If for whatever reason that time changes, if you have digital communications, you will receive an email, text, or phone call letting you know that it's been pushed out.
I'm not making myself clear.
So-
When you
No,
say 4,
Yeah.
people plan their day around that. They plan their children's schedule around that. They plan dinner around that. So if you don't really think, we make dinner here. If you don't really think it's gonna be 4, the request has been made to not say it's gonna be 4, because people count on that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. In fact, my situation, I didn't even ask for estimated restoration time because I know how those things can move. But the other converse is if we also have run into situations where we erroneously tell them that the power will be out longer. But accuracy, normally when that goes in the system, it goes into the type of work that they're doing, and so it's kind of a standard format.
Well, then
yeah,
they need to
it doesn't-
retweak their standard, because
Hey,
every
Mike,
time
we
it's
have
been
been
at least
having-
50% longer than your estimate, so.
Yeah.
Longer outages than expected on some of the work we've been doing. Can you speak to that at all? I think they were mentioning that maybe some of these outages.
Oh,
have
out of
been
Liso is at
going-
6:45, it was still out. And then last Monday at 6:45, out of Liso, it was still out. Out there near Crown Valley, it was out to 7:30 one night on the 10th, and then 6:45 on the 17th, so it's.
I think there was
It's, a lot of the work that's being done is not being done out of the district, so I don't have any knowledge of those outages, so.
we can look into
Yeah.
that.
That'd be great,
Just
just,
wanna make sure that.
if you have to shut down, you have to shut down, but people assume that 4 is a reasonable estimate.
I would say like edging on the side of conservatives saying 6 rather than 4 or whatever, you know, if it's gonna, think it might run up to that 4, maybe.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
Yeah.
I used to be giving those ERTs, and it is frustrating. But again, it's normally by the type of work.
Yeah.
And, you know, and these days, I think in the past, the business and folks are trying to give, you know, as much as accurate information as we can. We rely on the outage system, and if they're moving past that deadline, they have the ability to update that. The notice might be different, but I mean, learning the trade, they may be done with the work, and it's just a switching process or something, and we're waiting for something else that's, you know, I've had people call us and you guys are gone. I don't even see a truck in the street, and I still don't have power. So there's something happening at the grid control, and I think in an area like this where you got a lot of circuits going through, it's a little bit trickier than. But I hear you.
Well, yeah, I don't want you to think I'm saying don't do what you need to do. Take as long as you need, just don't give people a false sense of when it's gonna end.
Yeah.
Wait, because they plan their day around things.
I agree.
Did you have any other questions?
No, that's it, that's fine.
Any questions?
Well, thank you very much for coming, I
There will
really
be
appreciate
updates,
it.
and we will be back.
And I'm gonna get a helicopter schedule. Hopefully it'll be a very small one, right?
I have your email now.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For coming
I
out.
appreciate it.
Sustainability plan.
Okay, so, pull that up, sorry. I went down in power. Okay.
Did we get any of their cards?
Oh, you know what, can we have cards?
Please.
I know we have Miss Seelsman's
You
card.
almost got away. So close.
I never think of these details.
Good job.
Thank you, Pam.
Just because I'm the secretary tonight, I don't want to fail on
Yes.
my job. Kelly will say, who is here?
I'm sorry. So, it was announced at the ARTC.
Thank you.
And these are some extras if you wanna leave these in the library.
Oh, yeah.
Thank
That would
you.
be awesome.
Oh, yeah,
That would be awesome.
Yeah, Jim, can we put these Edison things in the library? Do you have a place for stuff? That would be awesome, thank you.
We'll leave them on the front.
Yeah.
And Chuck, so now that we know that the county knows about all these outages ahead of time,
And yes, well, we do, last fall, we got lots of notices out of the Santa Clarita area. I don't know if any of them ever came up, but they kept telling us about potential notices on circuits in the Santa Clarita area. I'm pretty sure there wasn't a single one in Acton, because I kept looking at them. But last fall, we got a number of them.
okay.
And it's where the heaviest winds are, and from what I saw, it was when the highest winds were occurring, it was during Santa Ana conditions, when in the Antelope Valley, there's not hardly any wind at all in the Antelope Valley during Santa Ana. I think you get winds here
Oh, yeah.
during Santa Ana.
The Shannon Valley is always windy.
But it was all in the Santa Clarita area.
Okay.
But I
Well,
can let
maybe,
you guys know.
maybe now that they've mapped everything here, we're gonna be on their radar now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the Shannon Valley and it's windy all the time. Ignore Santa Ana's for a little bit, it's all the time. So the numbers that he threw out, I'm going, my power's just gonna be out for a
No,
month.
and
I got no power, I'm
it seemed
Stone
like
Age.
in the 50 and 60 mile per hour forecast that we were seeing, that we, when they would be, I mean, I see
Yeah.
forecast of 50 or 60 miles per hour in the Santa Clarita Valley, and that's when we get these notices. But then the notices would go out, say, there's a potential, shutdown. As far as I know, they
And I
got
think
canceled.
I would say, I think I received one potential, like, one of the e-notices or something in the fall.
But
I
last
didn't.
fall, we get a lot of those, but they were, like I said, I think every single one I saw was Santa Clarita.
Well, it should help a lot to have these coded conductors in, that should help.
Yeah.
A lot.
I mean, otherwise, why do it?
So the outage price we're paying now, might
Hopefully we'll
avoid
pay
outages.
dividends later.
That's the plan, So the county, has prepared a draft sustainability plan. And it's, there were maybe 14, 15 meetings or more over the last year or so. None of them were up in the Antelope Valley. There was no real communication to rural communities. We received on April 25th, we received an email from Regional Planning that a Planning Commission hearing on the sustainability plan was scheduled for May 1, which gave us, 6 days. And we didn't have any meetings scheduled.